Marker?
Ow!
Yeah,
Just to scare you.
You still got it.
At 99 years old, Mel Brooks still has sharper comedic timing than most performers half his age. The mastermind behind Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, and the producers is a walking archive of showbiz stories, and he's never been afraid to throw a few comedic punches, especially at himself and his friends.
Our next guest had his welcome crashed by Mel here at the start of the show.
Mel.
So let's make up for it now.
I didn't know who he was.
So when Mel casually started rattling off the actors he hated most over his career, fans leaned in. But in typical Brooks fashion, hate means something very different. This isn't a list of feuds or bitter rivalries. No bridges were burned here. Instead, it's a playful, laugh-out-loud rundown of the actors who drove Mel a little crazy. Sometimes on set, sometimes in casting rooms, and sometimes just because they were too good. If anything, each grudge reveals how much Mel respected, admired, and loved these performers. Because in Mel Brooks' world, hate is just love in a Groucho Marx mustache.
You are death.
Yes. Does everybody want soup?
Please, we must talk. This may be our last supper.
Hey, it's my first order.
Every jab is a Valentine. Every complaint ends in a laugh. So, what happens when one of comedy's sharpest minds lets loose with a list of the actors who gave him headaches, heartbreak, and hysterics? You get a countdown that's part roast, part tribute, and all Mel. From legends like John Wayne to his own favorite collaborators, Mel isn't pulling punches, but he's definitely pulling your leg. Let's dive in. These are the 10 actors Mel Brooks says he hated the most, and why each one left a hilarious mark on his incredible 99-year journey. Number 10, John Wayne.
Yeah, I'll have a touch. Ooh, this is the kind of coffee I like.
That said,
Well, that's
that
really
said
fun.
Mrs. Olson right on her can if you drink that.
Too dirty for the Duke. Mel Brooks starts his playful list with a giant, John Wayne. Yes, the Duke himself. But what lands Wayne on this countdown isn't a feud or clash. It's the fact that he said no.
There's a lot of things I'm not saying to you, mister. Well, you got a sawed-off shotgun in my middle. But how do you know this Indian had anything to do with it?
And Mel has never quite let it go. Not in anger, but in the classic Brooks style of loving mockery. Back in 1974, when Brooks was wrapping up the script for Blazing Saddles, he had a wild idea: get John Wayne to make a surprise cameo. Imagine it. The most iconic cowboy of all time showing up in a Western comedy that turns the whole genre upside down. It would have been comedy history. Mel gave Wayne the script. Wayne read it, laughed hysterically, and handed it back. He said, "I can't do this movie, Mel. It's just too dirty. But I'll be first in line to see it." Brooks didn't press him, but he never forgot it. Wayne's refusal wasn't personal. He had an image to protect. But Mel hates it in the most hilarious way. He jokes that losing out on Wayne was like losing a dream scene that would have blown the doors off the theater. Picture the Duke walking into a fart-filled campfire scene, tipping his hat, and walking back out. It would have been genius. To this day, Brooks tells the story with affection, not bitterness. But he includes Wayne on this list as a kind of comedic protest. The guy who could have made Blazing Saddles even more unforgettable simply chose not to. And that's classic Mel, turning regret into a punchline, spinning a missed cameo into a decades-long inside joke. John Wayne didn't show up, but in Mel Brooks' world, even saying no makes you part of the legend. Number 9, Orson Welles. The voice that emptied Mel's wallet.
It took Beethoven 4 years to write that symphony. Some things can't be rushed. Good music and good wine. Paul Masson's Emerald Dry.
Coming in at number 9 is one of the most legendary voices in film history, Orson Welles. No, he didn't appear on screen in a Mel Brooks movie, but he did something even more unforgettable. He made Mel pay up. Big time.
I paid him for 5 days, like $5,000 a day, right? So he started at to test his voice out. This is about 10 to 9 in the morning. By 11:30, 12 o'clock, he had done all of the narration. It was all perfect. He said, any changes, I'll do anything you want, Mel. I said, it's flat out perfect. What do you...
When Brooks was making History of the World, Part 1, he needed a narrator with gravitas, someone who could say even the dumbest line with biblical authority. Enter Wells, director of Citizen Kane, radio mastermind, and owner of the most commanding voice in Hollywood. Mel knew he was perfect. He reached out and Wells agreed, but there was a catch. $25,000 in cash, delivered in a brown paper bag. Mel, being Mel, went along with it. Wells arrived one morning, stepped into the recording booth, and read all the narration in about 2 hours flat. No retakes, no mistakes, just perfection. Afterward, Mel handed him the bag. Curious, he asked, "Orson, what are you going to do with all that money?" Wells lit a cigar and said, "I'm going to spend it all on fine Cuban cigars and the best beluga caviar." Mel just stared, then laughed. Brooks hated Wells for being so casually brilliant, for making thousands of dollars in a morning while sounding like a god, for finishing faster than Mel could say action. But really, it was awe disguised as a grumble. To this day, Mel jokes that Orson Welles robbed him blind with talent. That deep, booming voice gave the film its epic tone. And the price, worth every penny, even if it came out of Mel's own pocket. Welles may not have worn a costume or delivered a gag, but he still managed to steal the scene. And that's why Mel lovingly adds him to this list, with one hand on his wallet. Number 8. Madeline Kahn.
Here I stand, the goddess of desire, set men on fire.
Sassing the boss at her audition. At number 8 is the brilliant, bold, and effortlessly funny Madeline Kahn. A woman Mel Brooks adored so much, he had to put her on this list, for totally roasting him during her first audition. It was 1974, and Mel was casting Blazing Saddles. He was looking for someone to play Lily von Stupp, a sultry, over-the-top singer clearly inspired by Marlene Dietrich. Enter Madeline Kahn, a Broadway star with comic timing to burn. She had the pipes, the presence, and the sass. Mel recalls asking her to show a little leg to mimic Dietrich's iconic pose. Without missing a beat, Kahn replied, "So it's that kind of audition?" Then she deadpanned, "No touching." Mel burst into laughter and maybe turned a little red. He knew right then she was perfect. That was the moment Madeline flipped the power dynamic. She walked in auditioning and walked out holding the upper hand. Mel jokes that he hated how quickly she turned the tables on him. But really, he loved every second of it. Kahn would go on to steal scenes in Young Frankenstein and High Anxiety, often with just a raised eyebrow or a perfectly timed pause. Mel called her the greatest female comedian who ever lived. But she also had a way of keeping him humble. Brooks places her here not out of real irritation, but as a salute to how brilliantly she could match wits, even with the director. That little line, "No touching," stuck in Mel's memory for decades. So why is Madeline Kahn on this list? Because she beat Mel at his own game during an audition. And in the Brooks playbook, anyone who can do that earns a spot. Not in shame, but in comedic glory. Number 7. Sid Caesar. Dangling by a thread, literally. At number 7 is the man who gave Mel Brooks his first real break and nearly gave him a heart attack, Sid Caesar. A towering figure in early television and a legend of sketch comedy, Caesar was Mel's boss, mentor, and occasional tormentor on your show of shows. Their bond? Equal parts admiration and insanity.
I can listen to it and I get, because every language has its own song. Italian has its own song, French has its own song, German has its own song.
One day in the 1950s, Mel, then a young writer, pushed Sid too far. Brooks made a wisecrack that hit a nerve, and the next thing he knew, Caesar had him dangling out of a New York skyscraper window by his ankles. That's not a metaphor. It really happened. Mel laughs about it now. He says, "I saw all of Manhattan upside down and thought, well, this is how I die, making a joke that bombed." Caesar eventually pulled him back in, probably chuckling, and they went right back to work. but Mel never forgot it. He hated Sid in that moment, of course. Who wouldn't? But in typical Brooks fashion, that brush with death became a lifelong punchline. Even when Caesar terrified him, Mel saw the comedy. Caesar had a temper, sure, but he was also a genius. He'd improvise entire routines in fake German, crush live sketches with physical comedy, and inspire writers like Brooks, Neil Simon, and Larry Gelbart. Mel credits him with shaping his sense of timing, chaos, and fearlessness. So why is he on the list? Because Sid Caesar, in a moment of comic rage, nearly tossed Mel out a window. And because that moment perfectly sums up their relationship, volatile, hilarious, and weirdly affectionate. Mel Brooks may have dangled in terror, but he also soared because of Sid. And now he repays the favor with a spot in this tongue-in-cheek countdown. Sometimes your greatest inspiration also scares the hell out of you. Number 6, Marty Feldman.
You know, I'll never forget my old dad. When these things would happen to him, the things he'd say to me.
What did he say?
What the hell are you doing in the bathroom day and night? Why don't you get out of there? Give someone else a chance.
What Hump and Other Crimes Against Continuity. At number 6 is the unforgettable Marty Feldman, the bug-eyed mischief maker who turned a supporting role into pure comedic gold in Young Frankenstein. As Igor, pronounced Igor naturally, Feldman didn't just steal scenes, he rewrote the rules while Mel wasn't looking. One of Mel's favorite stories from set? Feldman secretly moved Igor's fake hump from one shoulder to the other between takes, just to mess with continuity. No warning, no explanation, just mischief. It took Mel several days to notice. When he finally did, instead of yelling, he cracked up and turned it into a gag. In the final cut, Gene Wilder's character asks, "Didn't that hump used to be on the other side?" And Feldman casually shrugs. What hump? It became one of the film's most iconic lines. Mel hated Marty for that. Not in any real way, of course, but because Feldman outwitted him on his own set. Brooks was the director after all, supposedly the guy in control. And yet here was Marty, improvising his way into legend and making Mel rewrite the rules on the fly. That's the thing about Feldman. He was unpredictable in the best way. His delivery was deadpan perfection, and his commitment to absurdity was unmatched. Mel once said, Marty didn't just play Igor. He became him. He lived in that twisted, hilarious skin. Feldman's antics could easily have derailed the film, but Brooks embraced the chaos. In fact, he thanked Marty for teaching him to loosen the reins, to let the funniest moments happen naturally, even if they weren't planned. So why is Marty Feldman on the list? Because he pranked Mel, baffled the crew, and helped create one of the greatest comedy scenes ever. And because any actor who can bend the rules and still make the director laugh deserves a spot, especially when his crime becomes a classic. Number 5, Richard Pryor.
Hell. If there's a hell, I've been there. There is a hell. And the devil turned out to be me.
The funniest man who wasn't allowed to star. At number 5 is Richard Pryor, a comic genius, a screenwriting partner, and the star who never was. At least not in Blazing Saddles. Mel Brooks didn't hate Richard. In fact, he admired him deeply. What he hated was not being able to cast him in the role he was born to play. Pryor co-wrote the outrageous and groundbreaking script for Blazing Saddles, and Mel desperately wanted him to star as Sheriff Bart. But the studio had other ideas. Warner Brothers execs were skittish about Pryor's personal life, his drug use and unpredictable behavior, and ultimately refused to insure him. Mel fought for him. He argued Pryor was the real deal, the raw voice the film needed. But the suits didn't budge. So Cleveland Little stepped in and was terrific, but Brooks never stopped feeling cheated on Pryor's behalf. He later joked that he hated how Hollywood politics kept Richard off that screen. He was too dangerous, too honest, too brilliant, Mel said, so they got scared. Still, Pryor's fingerprints are all over the film. His sense of humor, his fearlessness, his social insight, it all stayed in the script. That infamous campfire scene with the beans, Pryor's idea, the razor-sharp satire about racism. Pryor's voice echoed through every punchline. Mel's frustration wasn't just professional, it was personal. He'd found a kindred spirit in Pryor, someone just as willing to burn the rule book for the sake of a joke. Losing him as a star was like losing a limb. So why is Richard Pryor on the list? Because Mel hated that the world didn't get to see what could have been. Pryor lighting up the screen with the words he helped write. It's not a grudge against Richard. It's a roast of an industry that missed a moment of comedic history. Number 4, Harvey Korman.
Sir,
what is it?
Yes,
What
if
is
you
it?
will just sign this, Governor, right here.
Yes. What the hell is it?
Too funny for his own good. Coming in at number 4 is the brilliant, scene-stealing Harvey Korman, and according to Mel Brooks, that was exactly the problem. Korman was one of Mel's most trusted comic actors, appearing in Blazing Saddles, High Anxiety, and History of the World, Part 1. But Brooks jokingly says he hated Harvey for one simple reason. He ruined too many takes by being too damn funny. Mel tells the story often. He'd be directing a scene, focused, professional, locked in. And then Korman would deliver a look, a pause, a single word, and Mel would completely lose it. Sometimes just making eye contact with Harvey on set would send them both into uncontrollable laughter. "I couldn't get through a scene without collapsing," Mel said. "It was comedy suicide. He murdered me, take after take." Korman wasn't just funny, he was dangerously funny. His comic timing was surgical, his expressions absurd, and his voice capable of ringing laughs from even the driest lines. In Blazing Saddles, his portrayal of the villainous Hedley Lamar is both evil and utterly ridiculous, often in the same sentence, and he knew exactly how to make Mel crack. He'd wait for the most serious moment, then slip in a smirk or a muttered aside. Chaos. Mel was director and ringmaster, but Korman was the clown prince, bringing the house down every time. Brooks loved it and hated it, because how do you finish a movie when the actor won't stop making the director laugh? That's why Harvey Korman lands on this list. It's a tongue-in-cheek complaint from a man who adored his friend but never managed to stay mad at him. In fact, Mel might argue that Korman's greatest crime wasn't breaking character, it was breaking the director, over and over again. Number 3, Zero Mostel.
Criminal life! Whoa! I want that money!
Genius and madness in equal measure. At number 3 is the explosive, unpredictable, and utterly unforgettable Zero Mostel, the man who helped launch Mel Brooks' film career in The Producers. Mel describes working with Zero as both heaven and hell, often in the same hour, and that's exactly why he hated him, lovingly of course. Mostel was a towering force of nature. He could take a simple line and turn it into operatic brilliance, or derail an entire day with his mood swings. Mel remembers moments of magic where Zero would deliver a scene so perfect, so hysterical, that the entire set would freeze in awe. "He gave me joy, lunacy, fireworks," Mel said, "and sometimes migraines." Then came the other days. Mostel had been injured by a bus a year before filming, and he didn't hesitate to invoke that injury when he didn't feel like shooting. At exactly 5:30 p.m., he'd shout, "My leg! I'm going home!" honoring a strict clause in his contract, and vanish, even if a scene wasn't done. Brooks would plead, bargain, beg, but Mostel was immovable. He was impossible, Mel admitted. He was also brilliant. The love-hate dynamic was legendary. Zero challenged Mel constantly, rejecting direction, rewriting lines on the fly, even questioning Brooks' authority. But in return, he gave Mel The Producers, one of the most iconic performances in comedy history. So why does Mostel rank so high on Mel's hated list? Because he made things harder and better. Because he refused to be tamed. Because he was, in Mel's own words, a storm I had to learn to dance in. It's a tribute dressed as a roast, a nod to a man who frustrated Mel Brooks to no end, but also helped make him a legend. And if there's one thing Mel respects, it's a fellow hurricane in human form. Number 2, Gene Wilder.
I would write all day, and then he'd come over after dinner and look at, yeah. Okay, now, we need a villain. The Burgermeister isn't a good enough villain. We need a real villain, and so on and so on. And one night he came over, and he looks at the pages, and he says, you tap dance to Irving Berlin?
Right.
In Top Hat and Tails with the Monster?
Right.
He said, are you crazy?
The only man who beat Mel in an argument. Sliding into number 2 is the beloved curly-haired genius Gene Wilder. Mel Brooks and Gene had a bond that was part brotherhood, part creative collision. And Mel hated Wilder in the most affectionate way possible, because he was often right. Their most famous creative clash came during the making of Young Frankenstein. Wilder insisted on including the now legendary Puttin' on the Ritz musical number. Mel thought it was ridiculous. A Frankenstein monster in Top Hat and Tails? You've gone mad, Mel yelled. The two argued, loudly, for over 20 minutes. Finally, Mel gave in. He threw up his hands and said, "Fine, it's in." The scene would go on to become one of the film's most iconic moments. Mel later admitted he was testing Gene's passion. If he fought hard enough, he deserved it. Wilder passed that test, and Mel hated how well it worked. But Gene's ultimate power move came with one bold condition. He'd only do Young Frankenstein if Mel didn't appear in the film. Knowing Mel's love for zany cameos, Wilder insisted that Brooks stay behind the camera to preserve the film's tone. Mel agreed, reluctantly. And aside from a few voice cameos, he honored that promise. "That's the only actor who banned me from my own movie," Mel joked later. And he loved him all the more for it. Wilder was Mel's trusted partner on multiple films, from The Producers to Blazing Saddles, and a friend who could match him, joke for joke, stubbornness for stubbornness. Mel didn't truly hate him. He missed him, fiercely. Gene Wilder makes this list not because he drove Mel crazy, but because he outsmarted him, challenged him, and left him laughing. That's the kind of grudge you only carry when you've lost someone you love. Number 1, Mel Brooks himself, the actor who gave me the most trouble. At the very top of Mel Brooks' list of hated actors is Mel Brooks. That's right. In classic Mel fashion, he saves the biggest roast for The Man in the Mirror. And if you ask him, he earned it. Why? Because according to Mel, he was the worst kind of actor to direct, a know-it-all spotlight-hogging, scene-stealing nuisance. He always gave himself the best lines, the funniest cameos, the biggest moments, Mel has joked, and never listened to the director because, well, the director was also him. Throughout his films, from Blazing Saddles to Spaceballs to History of the World, Mel cast himself in outrageous roles. Governors, presidents, kings, wise men, idiots. He'd show up in the middle of chaos and make sure everyone knew who was running the show, even if it meant mugging for the camera a little too much. Sometimes the cast would try not to laugh. Sometimes they'd roll their eyes. But Mel? He never backed down from a chance to be ridiculous. And that's exactly why he places himself at number 1. Not out of real anger, but out of self-aware affection. Because he knows, and wants you to know, that comedy means nothing if you can't laugh at yourself. "I was the hardest actor I ever worked with," Mel once quipped. He always thought he was the star, and most of the time, he was. This final spot isn't just a punchline, it's a lesson. In a career built on parody, Mel Brooks always knew the biggest target should be himself. It's the ultimate Brooksism. Poke fun at the world, but start with your own face. Because in Mel's universe, the greatest joke of all is being Mel Brooks. And there you have it. 10 hated actors, Mel Brooks style. Every name on this list? A backhanded hug. Whether it was losing John Wayne, arguing with Gene Wilder, or roasting himself, Mel proves once again, comedy is love in disguise. If you laughed, learned something, or just love Mel's madness, don't forget to subscribe for more Hollywood stories with a twist. We've got plenty more behind-the-scenes legends coming your way. Thanks for watching. And remember, in Mel's world, it's always good to be the king.